Good evening, everybody. Just rolling through the list of attendees. We have a really robust group tonight, and I'll begin by saying thank you for joining me this evening, taking time out of your busy lives. And we've tried to offer these at a variety of times, and there seems to be no perfect time. But as I look through the attendee list, we have a really nice mix of people today, including staff, self-advocates, some provider interest, some advocacy groups, a lot of family members. And so we're really happy you could take time out of your busy day to join us. So I'm Jordan Sheff, for those of you who I haven't met, and I know a lot of you on the call tonight I've met or conversed with, et cetera, over the years, and some new faces. So I'm glad you're joining us tonight. Tonight I'm really hoping to talk very little in terms of presenting, and spend more time hearing questions and doing my best to answer and respond to them with some of my staff who are on the call. Just for your awareness, the new two of our new regional directors at a minimum are on the call tonight. Shannon O'Brien in the West region and Stacy Silva Gordon in the North region. Our ombudsperson Shannon Giacovino's on, Deputy Commissioner Elisa Villardo, my chief of staff, Katie Rock Burns, and there's more, and I'm going to miss them because I'm looking at the list and I can't see everybody's faces. They may have an opportunity, and I may call out for some help in responding to some of those questions. But our reason for getting together now, one, I like to be able to check in and to have these face-to-face opportunities with you. It's also an opportunity for us specifically to talk about the America Rescue Plan Act and the incredible opportunity we have in front of us that we've already started down the road, and we have a couple more years of time to work to leverage some money that we earned as a state on the back of the COVID pandemic experience, and federal funds awarded to us as a result of that. So this is an opportunity, relatively it's the start of a new year. Always a time for renewal and for looking forward to make new plans and resolutions. And so we thought we'd take this opportunity over a series of nights to engage with you. I'll have Elisa drill down a little bit further into what ARPA is and what that means, to cover some of the areas in which we plan and are making investments. It won't be all the areas in which we're making investments, but let me just share a couple of things. The conversation tonight is to hear from you what's missing from our continuum of services that might make sense for you. What are reasons perhaps that you are interested in having this conversation? Are there opportunities that might be right for you or your loved one in terms of how you receive supports and services, how they might look different and might be more rewarding? And we'll plant some seeds about some ideas, and Elisa will talk about that in the ARPA. But I want to be sure and to be clear, this isn't a presentation about what's being taken out of the system, what's being eliminated. This isn't about budget cuts. This isn't about that. This is about looking forward. And having done a number of these now, I want to say that if what you have right now is working for you and you want it to continue to work for you, we're not looking to take anything away. And this may not be exactly, this doesn't have to mean that there's change for everybody, but change can be good. It can be very rewarding. And what my goal is every day is I wake up and how can I provide the right supports to the right people at the right time, and make sure that that is afforded to as many people as possible. Having come to the state about 20 years ago, the conversations within DDS have often been, not always, about the haves and the have-nots. In my early days, it was about public versus private, or union providers versus non-union providers. It's very much now those who are getting supports and services and those who are not. And my goal prior to any news coming out of Hartford from our legislators had been, prior to knowing anything, to try and do what we can to take some people off the wait list, knowing that we have these opportunities that Elisa's going to run through in a minute. So thank you again for joining. it takes a village, and I'm looking forward to hearing from many of you. While I expect your comments will be centered around your loved one, I don't want to necessarily drill down into too many specifics. So in addition to the staff I mentioned, my executive assistant, Gunnar Abrahamson, is on the call, and he's been your contact for getting registered and all that. If you have something particular you want to share, and it's very specific, we can take that offline and we'll get back to you, and you can email him with that. Or if we cut you off at some point and say that's just getting a little too down in the weeds for tonight in a broader conversation, it isn't our intent to stifle you or any of that, but we could spend, I know enough of you on the call tonight that we could spend a lot of time talking just about your loved one and have a wonderful conversation, but that isn't necessarily the point for tonight. So with that, thanks again for attending. I'm excited to have one of these, and there'll be more of these over the next couple of years and in the years that follow, but specific to the spending opportunity, there'll be more of these. So I also know you're busy at home, many of you, and so if you come in and out of the conversation, that's okay too. So with that, I'll turn it over to Elisa, who will spend a few minutes running through some of the ARPA, and then we're hoping that you have some questions or thoughts or ideas to share back with us. Deputy Commissioner Velardo.
Thank you, Commissioner. And it's really good to see everyone here tonight. I see a lot of familiar faces and names, and I'm looking forward to the discussion this evening. So I am going to give a high-level overview of what ARPA is and what the different initiatives are. I'll touch briefly on each, and then our goal is, as the Commissioner said, to have a conversation. And so we can drill into any of these areas, and we can talk more specifically about what the initiatives include. So the first is something that pretty much everyone in our service system is aware of, whether you're a person that self-directs, whether you're involved with our provider community, whether you're a provider yourself, is staffing issues, staffing stability. And so our first initiative was centered around stabilizing the provider network. There have been payments that have been made to our qualified providers with the intent of really stabilizing workforce issues, retaining good quality staff, and having the ability to recruit staff where there are vacancies. And so we've made 2 payments in that area, and are hopeful that initiative around stabilization of our workforce and our provider network will pay off, and will allow us to do some of these other things that will rely on staffing in our provider network. The second area is the expansion and integration of the use of assistive technology. One of the things that we found during the pandemic in particular was the use of assistive technology has exploded. People have participated in virtual services, have connected with people, friends, services remotely. We've expanded our service offerings to include remote supports. We've issued a number of notices of opportunities to allow people to connect to assistive technology, receive evaluations that provide guidance in terms of what assistive technology might be useful, and then to access that technology. And those notices of opportunity have been both for individuals and families, as well as people that are supported by providers. There are active notices of opportunity right now around assistive technology. And we're also looking to expand that to include assistive technology for people in their workplace, or we've had some really wonderful micro enterprises and using assistive technology to support people as they start their own businesses. So lots going on in that area. The next area is also something that's received quite a bit of buzz. Some of you may have heard about our original iDash developments. Those are apartment complexes where a certain number of the apartments are set aside for people with ID. Those initial I- developments are all up and running. And we've now expanded into what we call supportive housing. That's very similar to what the I- started as multi-unit apartment complexes, oftentimes built from the ground up. The developer gets tax credits for including underserved populations, and we've developed some really nice relationships with developers in Connecticut. Providers have partnered with those developers, and we've seen additional supportive housing units that have begun to open. Takes a little bit of lead time because when you're developing a 50-unit apartment complex, from planning to opening, it's usually about 2.5 years. But we're expanding supportive housing to existing apartment complexes, and that should really afford additional opportunities without that long lead in time. There is a notice of opportunity that was recently issued around expanding non-project based supportive housing, and that is, as I said, apartment units that are set aside in existing apartment complexes. So hopefully that's going to expand geographically and in terms of numbers, the opportunities available to people in that area. We have ARPA initiatives that are particularly designed to enhance self-direction for those who self-direct by really creating an expanded employment platform. We talked about the workforce issues. That certainly has had an impact on the people who self-direct as well. We have a contract with a platform called Rewarding Work, and that's always been in place, or it's been in place for quite some time, but it's been expanded quite significantly, and come within the next month or so, that platform is going to have many expanded features that should allow expanded ease of finding employees that are interested in working in a particular area or with particular population, and assist with the matching process. We've invested in improving the role and the responsibility of the fiscal intermediary, and that should help in terms of people who self-direct. We have initiatives that are designed to increase the quality or the capacity of our own internal systems within DDS. Some of you may have participated at one point or another with National Core Indicators, the NCI project. That's a national longitudinal study that looks at quality of supports and satisfaction. We're expanding our work as part of the NCI as one of the states that participates in NCI, and looking at ways that we can better utilize the information that's available to us to inform our decisions. And then the area that I think many of you may be interested in, certainly our provider community is very well aware of, and we've really been trying to engage families. You may have gotten a survey, is around our system transformation. We've called it the Moving On Plan. But really what it's designed to do is increase options available, both day and residential, to move from congregate settings to more individualized settings for people who choose that. And the intent is to give individuals and their teams an opportunity to look at redefining how they live and work in their communities, and how they may be able to utilize some of these new types of support to allow for more independence. Our provider community has planning tools that they have available to them, and we've had about 24 providers, a little more than 24 providers, who have expressed interest in being part of phase 1 of the Moving On transformation initiative. But it's really important for people on this call to know that the actual conversations will take place at the individual team level. These are personal decisions, and they will be team conversations. So how are we doing all this? This is a massive effort. As the commissioner said, this is kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity. It has the potential to really impact people who currently may not have services. And for those who are currently receiving services, may really give them increased options. We've hired staff that are working on these initiatives. Peter Mason, the former deputy commissioner, is leading the effort on the DDS end. And then we're working with some consultants that are helping us around these efforts. We have a number of stakeholder committees that have been formed and have been meeting for several months now to discuss various aspects of the work that's going on. Committees are all comprised of individuals, family members, DDS staff, and providers. And there are 5 committees that I want to just touch on. One is an overall ARPA advisory committee on transformational work that is kind of overseeing the discussions that are taking place in the individual committees and providing some guidance. There is an ARPA day transformation committee that's really focused on expanding options for people in individualized employment or day settings. There is the ARPA Residential Transformation Committee, really expanding opportunities for people to live in more individualized settings in the community. We have a DDS Engagement Committee. That committee is really designed to work across all of our DDS staff to make sure that people are familiar with these initiatives, that they can answer questions, or if they get a question that they can't answer, they know who to connect with to get that answer, but that our DDS internal staff are aware of all of these opportunities. And then there's a ARPA Individual and Family Engagement Committee, and that group has been working really closely around some of the communication efforts that hopefully you've seen. There is a ton more information on our website. This is really a quick overview. If you're interested in the work that's been going on in these committees, you can go on our website. On the left-hand side, you'll see a link for ARPA information, and you can find the minutes of the different committees. You can find even recordings of the meetings. You'll find a lot of written documentation around these ARPA initiatives. But that gives you an overview, and at this point, we'd love to open it up for questions.
Thanks, Elisa. And I hope that was a quick overview. There's a lot of depth to that. And we can dig into some of the details on that. But really, this is an opportunity for you to ask questions. I did mention some advocacy folks who are on the call tonight, whether they're in their parent role or advocacy role, whenever it's from the ARC is here. And there are a number of people on the call tonight from Connecticut Family Support Network. You'll often hear me say CTFSN. And that is who they are. And there's at least 2 or 3 folks on the call joining us, and a few provider faces I see as well. Members of your both the RAC, the North Region RAC at least, maybe other, and DS Council, Advisory Council, through a legislative appointment that works with me and makes recommendations to the governor based on the work we do together. So I see a hand up. There's a couple things that already dropped in the chat. Gunnar and Kevin will help facilitate the chat. So if you're not comfortable on camera or it's difficult to, you can drop a note in the chat and we can do that. And right now we'll look at for Stacy Varvaro.
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay.
Perfect.
My question is, when she mentioned iDash,
Yeah.
I don't know, like I'm a little new to all this, it feels like.
Sure.
I feel like I know so little, honestly. And those apartment complexes, where can you find where they are? And just so I can like get a look at them and see what they're all about.
Sure. We can connect you if you are someone in the North region, depending on where you live. The closest one is probably the two operated by Favar, although Hark in Hartford has one in development. And Stacy, we'll take note of your name so we can connect you to one close to you so you can see what they're about. And I think there's some video floating around that we can also share of what they're like. We use the phrase IDASH from a specific round of federal funds that was about intellectual disability and autism spectrum housing. And we stood up the first couple of those and started that process. We're moving away from calling them IDASH because that funding actually doesn't exist anymore. But with our partnership with Department of Housing and the support the governor lends to affordable housing in the state, we have, I think, around 8 of them either up and running or in development. And they will eventually span the whole state. But we have some in the center of Connecticut, some south center coast, one in the southeast corner operated by ARC Eastern Connecticut, and one in the northwest corner by LARC, operated by Litchfield ARC. So there are a number of them. Notable about them is that for a number of people we support, they're a good alternative to constant 24/7 staffing while having 24/7 staffing available. They have relied on a mix of supports. We try and when the developers put forward their proposals, they tend to include information about accessibility, access to public transportation, access to vocational opportunities, work opportunities, and utilization of technology, although they don't all have the same complement of things. So they won't all look exactly alike, and they'll be different in size, but they are definitely becoming popular, and there's more autonomy for people who live in them than live in our traditional group home settings and things like that. But we can provide you, Stacy, with additional information. And as someone who's new, I'm glad I mentioned the ARC in Wynn Everett's, as well as CT Family Support Network. They are great places to get additional information and to have conversations with families who've been walking the journey you're on now for some time, in addition to our staff. But you'll get a different perspective and understanding, I think, family to family sometimes than you get from us.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you for the question.
I would add, I dropped a link in the chat, and we will do that throughout this presentation. I forgot to mention, but for the past 6-7 months, we've been hosting forums on these different service options. They're called the Fourth Tuesday Forums on innovative options. I just dropped the link to the supportive housing forum. If you go on our website, and on the cover page, it'll say Fourth Tuesday Forums. You'll see that there have been forums on a number of different options. And it's great to hear the commissioner and I and DDS staff talk about these options. But what's pretty special about these forums is that it's people that utilize these services. So you'll see individuals that live in a supportive housing complex take you on a tour of their apartment and talk about what it's like, what it means to them. You'll see family members that talk about their experience with these different options. And so if you really want, there are videos, there are PowerPoints. I saw somebody's interested in PowerPoints available on that site, and you can dig more deeply into these different options. On the supportive housing site, there is also a listing, as the commissioner mentioned, of the different supportive housing developments that are currently open or underway.
While we're waiting for Gunnar to go through the queue, I'm wondering, Lynn, I see your camera's on. Do you want to say hi real quick? And then Adriana, I don't know who from CTFSN. I know there's at least 2 or 3 of you on tonight. If someone wanted just to from your group to speak up, so people have a face with a name and can hear a little bit about how you can help on this journey. Wynn, you can go first.
Hi, everybody. My name is Wynn Everts. My wife and I are parents to a 32-year-old young man with IDD who presently attends a day program. I'm the executive director of the ARC Connecticut, an advocacy organization dedicated to protecting the rights of people with IDD and also promoting opportunities for their inclusion in their communities. I am happy to talk to anybody, and I will dump my contact information into the chat. We are trying desperately to make the pathway full of more obvious signs so that people can negotiate it faster. And we're having a little bit of luck in doing it. So this transformation is awfully important, and thank you all for showing up, because you'll learn more tonight than in many other presentations.
Thank you, Wynn. Did I put you on the spot, Adriana? Do you mind coming on to say hi, or is there someone else from your group you want to speak up tonight?
Oh, sure, we don't mind. Hello all, thank you, Commissioner Chef. Yes, there is several of us. There is Lena, Judy, and Melissa that we cover several areas, and so what we are is Connecticut Family Support Network, and we are a partner with DDS to help communicate between DDS and the community back to DDS, as well as supporting families and self-advocates through the lifespan with disabilities in general. And we do this not only connecting them with resources, but also connecting them to our support groups that we run monthly in English and in Spanish. We connect with running workshops for community members. And we also run workshops for providers, helping them communicate with individuals and families in a way that's positive and kind of just bridge that gap back and forth.
Thank you, Adriana.
Thank you.
And some of the questions, I'm going to turn to Gunnar to run through the questions. And in some of our meetings, Adriana has been very helpful providing some links, and I won't put that burden on you tonight. But one of the questions I noticed while I was looking at the chat was around some of the acronyms we use. Call us on that. We'll explain them. It's our first language, and it's a foreign language to many. And there's a list of some of those acronyms. We actually have like a glossary of those terms. NCI is National Core Indicators. It's a tool used across states to measure quality of services and quality of outcomes. Satisfaction survey, if you will. If your loved one is already getting annualized services, you likely have been part of that interview process along the way. So that's what one of those terms was you asked for. And Kevin's quick on the link. So there's some acronyms down there, but do call us on it. We do tend to get used to our own lingo, and it's important we explain ourselves. Gunnar, do you want to help me out with the chat a little bit?
Sure. So first, we have a couple questions in the chat regarding the workforce payments that were previously discussed. The first comes from Michelle Ravelli. Michelle says, all day programs are struggling with finances and staffing. Have these workforce payments actually come to the providers? And if so, is this just a 1 or 2 time stipend or an increase in rate? As I am unaware that these funds have actually come down to the providers.
So the money has been pushed out to the providers even ahead of us establishing the rates. We were providing funding so that providers could move to a minimum wage within our service system of $70.25 as of July 1. The workforce crisis is not any one specific program or area. It spans across residential, day, self-hire. It's everywhere, and it's not just our industry. It's across the state and across the country. When I talk to my colleagues in other states, they're fighting the very same battle. But we did push a fair amount of money out. It's annualized. It's not a one-time thing. There are some incentives through the ARPA funding that are different than the minimum wage bill that was passed at the end of the last biennium, so about a little over a year and a half ago, for workforce development and staff retention, and there has been money put out. I believe it's been conveyed to providers. Some of the one-time money. Elise is nodding affirmatively. But you know, it's a perfect storm of things. One of the hard parts about this is this opportunity to innovate and leverage these federal funds comes. I've been in the business a long time. We've been talking about workforce crisis since I started, but it has never been more real and at our doorstep in action than it is right now. In all the years I've been, it's never been this bad. So there is not a waiting list for day program in terms of a funding issue, but there is an access issue, and providers are doing all they can. And there's a few on the line tonight, doing all they can, as creative as they can to do that. And the governor and his staff are aware. It spans the DMIS services, our services, autism services, birth to 3, Office of Early Childhood. It's problematic. The tech layoffs that you're reading about in the news will eventually trickle to opportunities potentially for us to pick up some additional staff. But you'll hear through the legislative session, or I'll hear through the legislative session, a lot about that. One of the reasons that we are looking at these opportunities is not to replace staff, but to get the most out of the staff we have already. And I don't just mean DDS staff, I mean all the private provider staff, where we can save an hour of staff time in one place and replace it either with a natural support or technology as an opportunity to create a staff opportunity for somebody else. When we can innovate and transform for one person, we benefit every person eligible for our services. That's the approach we're going to take because we can't make people. So we're going to try and make opportunity. Or at least I'm well past the people making stage of my life. Gunnar, additional questions?
Yep. So we got a couple questions in the chat regarding the housing discussion we just had. So the first comes from Frank Lanzetta. Is there any movement to use part of the IND DDS budget for local housing rent assistance? If not, where can this concept be launched? Not everyone can move into a larger housing concept.
So the budget came out today, and I want to be careful about what I say because I don't remember each of the line items. We are concerned and are working with the administration over affordable housing, as I mentioned, and that would include a review of our internal rent subsidy program, but also the fact that some of those rates are really outdated. One of the other conversations that's going on, a bill proposal around asset limits. If you're looking to rent, typically your first month, last month, and security deposit would be in excess of your asset limit. So there's really no way for someone whose primary source of income is Medicaid, Social Security, to be able to save that kind of money to actually make that move. I do think that those conversations may be fruitful because it really won't be an obligation necessarily on the state in the way that we look to address those, or at least not the financial impact some of the other things do. So the best, we have a few case managers, at least a few case managers and some other managers on the call tonight, case management supervisors and ARDs. The best way to learn more about those is through your case manager. And if currently you're on the helpline, at least one of our IFS ARDs, individual and family support assistant regional director. So you're doing the acronym thing. And they can assist with trying to find the answers to specific questions, because a lot depends on your income and your benefits. So I don't know if that answered the question fully. We know it's a problem. We want to try and troubleshoot it. But these affordable housing projects are part of that because they have lifetime subsidy to them, which really takes strain off other parts of our budget. Gunnar?
Jordan, our next question on housing comes from Beth Catton. Beth wants to know what exactly is supportive housing? How supportive is it? Most, if not all, of the housing that just opened is for higher functioning individuals. They do not have 24/7 care. Is supportive housing 24/7 care?
So, Lisa, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Supportive housing is not for everyone, but it really works for quite a few people. What we've had prior to the recent supportive housing option, we had people that lived in individualized home supports, their own apartment with intermittent supports, from a few to maybe 20 or 25 hours of support a week, but they were pretty independent, living pretty independently. And then we went into community companion homes. That's living with a family that works well for a lot of people. And then we had our continuous residential supports, and that's CRS and CLA, community living arrangements, group homes. What supportive housing does is it meets a need for someone who may need access to 24-hour support, but they don't need somebody right in their apartment. So with supportive housing, I mentioned it's a number of set-aside units. Up to 25% of the apartments in an apartment complex can be set aside. So if there's 40 apartments, maybe up to 10 can be set aside for people that are receiving DDS services. And while we won't have staff 24 hours a day in all of the apartments, there will be staff available. And that's where we use things like assistive technology. We have really, it's shared staffing. So people have the benefit of privacy. You know, they have their own place. They don't necessarily have staff in their space all the time, but they have access to staff when they need access. And so that's the way it's been structured. There is overnight staff that's available. But again, it's not in each apartment. It's within the building, and then people can access the staff as they need it. Does that answer the question?
I think for now it does. If that didn't answer the question and you want to hear more, I think there are opportunities as we proliferate these to have even more comprehensive staffing available within the building. Our initial goal was to try and help some people move out of comprehensive settings where they needed access to 24. And because we didn't have anything like this, the choice was a group home or nothing. This is an opportunity for some people who may need access to, and with technology, you know, a call button, two-way monitoring, all sorts of technology that we could share with you, can make for some people who thought they needed in-person arm's reach kind of support round the clock. It may change your mind or your opinion on that. And one of the things we're asking providers to do, and one of the things we're promising to do, is to ensure that people could try these. What we've never been able to do before this opportunity is when someone wanted to try living somewhere else, we couldn't hold a bed for them somewhere else in the system. So this is an opportunity for people to try something new, and we have a way to keep providers whole for a period of time in their transformational plan, and keep those now empty beds funded for a period to see if this new thing works for the individual or not. And I think that experiencing it is really important for some people who are hesitant or tentative to take that first step. And I want to apologize. I turned to Adriana, not realizing Melissa was on the call. In my list, Adriana, alphabetically, you're the first name I saw and knew for sure. But Melissa Kremel's on the call as well, and I didn't mean to take that opportunity away from her. If you want to show your face and say hi as the executive director, I would like to afford you that opportunity.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. We're here to help anybody that has questions or anything. I think Adriana did a great job of introducing us and what we do, but you know, I would be happy to help anybody. And Adriana already put my contact information in the chat, so please feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Melissa. And she's been incredible throughout these as a partner in helping us keep things together and filling in families as she does. And the
Excellent.
fact that we have some bilingual support on these calls is terrific. Much appreciated. Lena, I see your hand up.
Yes, have a good night, everybody. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner, this is my question. I know that when the new housing they're going to come with all these technology devices with the video cameras and alarms and all the stuff that they are going to have. That is wonderful. But my question is about the group homes that we have right now, with DDS. Then, most of the maybe a big number of the residents, they are no verbal. Then do you think that these places, the residential, can have video cameras over there? Because it's my understood that it cannot be have that because it's against but then this is a problem where the child is coming with bruises and it's no verbal, and the staff say that they don't know how this happened.
Thank you, Lena. So in the spirit of life is a bit of a circle. What Lena's referring to is that our human rights committees have a long time, for privacy's sake, taken the position that we don't allow cameras in the homes as an invasion of privacy without a human rights committee approval. With the advent of remote supports, it runs contrary to cameras in the house. Now we're encouraging people to have not just cameras on them, but two-way cameras. And so, and even for individuals who are nonverbal in terms of the way I'm expressing myself now, but have other ways to communicate, that two-way technology, if you sign or use symbols or have other technology available, is working for some people with limited verbal communication or speaking communication the way I'm sharing with you. So we look at those in the group home situations on a case-by-case basis, and if and have given permission, and I won't mention where, but in a number of situations where there's been concerns where cameras have been utilized. We don't use them broadly. Some of the providers are union providers, and that's always a difficult conversation, although there are a number of DDS facilities that have them for security or other reasons. So everything I'm talking about, this is the big fight I have in my head. I'm trying to work with everyone to transform the system, but system-centered transformation and person-centered planning butt heads along the way. Everything we're going to do, we'll do together with the person at the center. And that's, I come back to making all my decisions is what's best for people with intellectual disability. So, and I know for sure that person-centered planning is the best way to achieve positive outcomes. So if that's a concern for your loved one, there are mechanisms to do that. And I put a lot on our case managers and their supervisors, but that conversation ought to start there. I remember approaching Commissioner Macy when I first started with the state 10 years ago about wanting to use them in a specific situation. And it was really hard for him, having been an advocate for so long, saying cameras invade privacy, there's no independence, it's institutional, it's all those things, to come round to him allowing me to have them utilized in a couple of settings. And I know that the utilization of those has increased. But there are privacy issues in the way that we use them. The interesting thing about technology and remote supports, not to go too much on a tangent, but when I was at a conference, Ohio is using some remote supports that, for privacy's sake, doesn't actually show people's faces. Or it's sort of like I don't know what the technology is, but you see sort of ghosts of people moving through the house, so that if they're changing or if they're using the bathroom, there's none of that's there, but you can clearly tell that there's one person or two people and what their interactions are like without any real compromising of dignity. So we expect to see that technology increase more and more. But I appreciate the question, Lena. If you have some concerns or families you're working with have concerns, start with the case manager and we can have that conversation.
Jordan, so we have a couple more questions on supportive housing in the chat. One of them is there any supported housing available in Vernon and Tolland? And how do individuals get their names on a list to live in supportive housing?
So I'll tell Lisa, you want to just take it?
Sure. So the link that I put in the chat has the list of the current supportive housing developments that have opened. What has opened has been Canton, Bloomfield, Hartford, West Hartford, and Torrington. There are about 8 or 9 developments in process, but I mentioned that we just, and then there are, when I say in process, that means the developer has submitted an application to the Department of Housing and CHFA, and it's been approved. So that is an approved development. Part of that application is the relationship with the qualified provider that says, yep, if this is approved, we have this provider who's willing to provide supports to individuals for this number of units. So those are the supportive housing developments that have been approved. There are quite a few that are in process. The applications were due in January, and we should find out in the spring if there have been other projects that have been approved. So those are the low income tax credit projects. But I mentioned that we also just put out a notice of opportunity for additional supportive housing, and that is existing apartment complexes. And so that just was issued last week. It is on our website and went out to providers and went out to our DDS case managers. And that would be not developing an apartment complex from the ground up, but if there's an apartment complex in Vernon, you mentioned Vernon, and there's outreach to the owner and the property manager, and they're interested in setting aside a number of units, a proposal can be made for funding from DDS. One of the things that's a little different with supportive housing versus somebody has an apartment and gets rent subsidy is with supportive housing, they get rental assistance vouchers. And so DDS is committed as part of this recent notice of opportunity that we will provide the rental assistance voucher. So if the owner and property manager are interested in setting aside apartments, the provider is able to provide supports, DDS will commit to those rental assistance vouchers. And that allows people to pay, generally, it's the thing that makes it affordable, regardless of what the market rate is. They only pay, I think it's up to 30% of their income. So it does make housing affordable. I know that was an earlier question, and we're hopeful. The notice of opportunity will allow up to 3 developments per region, and we will be prioritizing those that are in areas that don't currently have supportive housing developments in process. So.
So the other thing, Elisa, and don't mute yourself yet, because you may want to expand on this. When we talk about technology, I don't want you to think we're driving up to your home and dumping a bunch of boxes with Wi-Fi cards on them and saying, here, this will help. Can you talk a little bit about the assistive technology evaluation process, and that we rule some people in and some people out, and how that gets deployed?
I definitely can. So I mentioned those notices of opportunity that have been issued. I think we're on our 6th round. Some people know exactly what they need. If I just had an iPad with certain apps, it would make my life so much easier. You could submit a proposal and say, I need an iPad with these apps, and that's pretty straightforward. But oftentimes, it's not clear what would be helpful. You know, I know maybe I have difficulty taking my meds, but I'm not sure what really would be helpful. These assistive technology evaluations are an assessment that, you know, the evaluator goes out, they meet with the person in their setting, they really take time to get to know the person, know the environment, and then there will be recommendations. This might be useful, maybe these sensors, maybe this med minder. Then there's training that goes along with it. As the commissioner said, you know, technology just, I've certainly had technology that I couldn't figure out and therefore didn't use. I think most of us have had that experience. There's training to make sure that the person is comfortable with the technology. And if there are family members or staff that are going to be working with them, that they're comfortable with it. And then there's follow-up. So, okay, it's been a little while and it's just not doing what I thought it would do. It's just not working.
Yeah.
There's a follow-up phase where, okay, what's not working? Let's refine. Maybe this didn't work, so we'll try this. So the evaluation process is really designed to match the person with the technology that's really going to work for them. And it can be an ongoing process until they're comfortable that they have the right technology and they're comfortable with it.
So, and I'm gonna come back to housing in a second. On technology, some of that technology is passive. For instance, we're seeing demos on that will be valuable for us to deploy in group homes that can screen for diabetes by urinalysis on a routine basis, particularly for people who don't like to go in and give blood samples or require a pre-sedate to have some blood draws or things like that. Being able to collect that information will be really great, especially for pre-diabetics, so that we can learn what we need to help to prevent them from becoming diabetic. Some of it's active, where they actually need to engage with the technology. So it isn't that you have to know how to use a device necessarily. The world of assistive technology is broad. With regards to housing, I'll give a brief spiel that I've given at other places. There are some places in Connecticut, some towns, some municipalities that are not largely supportive of affordable housing. Those decisions are made at the local level, not at the state level. So when I say there's some of the questions in the chat are about locations, the developers, and we partner with developers for new construction. The developers for that new construction know where what towns will allow and support low income or affordable housing development, and there are some that won't. And that if that's an issue near where you think there ought to be affordable housing, though, that probably starts at the local level, and there's not much we can do. Having worked in the greater Manchester area when I ran March Incorporated, we had some towns nearby that would readily accept a Section 8 voucher and some that would not. More recently, we've had discussions with towns who will only allow for senior housing or senior and veteran housing, but no one else. So I don't know if that's the reason why affordable housing isn't available near maybe where you want it, but that's something that you could help me figure out. And I know I consumed a couple of the questions out of the chat there, Gunnar, and making you do double time trying to figure out what I answered and what I didn't. But if you want to queue up a couple more, because I don't see a hand up at present.
Sure. Our next question, we're shifting gears here to case manager assignment, comes from Yulia. She wants to know, are case managers now assigned to DDS eligible individuals who are 14 to 18 years old? She's asking because a few years ago, they were told they could not have a case manager, even though their kid was determined eligible for DDS services. Wondering if this has changed.
It hasn't changed much. During the Malloy administration, some decisions were made in prior administrations. And we began to utilize helpline for people who did not yet have an annualized service, which is most of the people under 21. Currently, if you are awarded day funding as you're coming out of high school, we start with you in the months prior. We would love to be in a position to be able to start with you in the years prior. A couple of my case managers and case manager supervisors who are on the line will remember the good old days where we could begin transition much earlier and partner. And we are in discussions about how we reconstitute some of that through positions we refer to as transition advisors or educational liaisons. And so that is that, but if you don't have a case manager yet and you're between 14 and 18, you're probably waiting. Our helpline staff handle a huge number of calls and cases, but they're very, very responsive, and there's bilingual support on our helpline, I believe in each of the regions or coverage when we need it. So we can help with things without a case manager. There are some people under 21 who do, because they, for various reasons, have been placed either by DCF, the local educational authority, or some other reason, and we do have case management involved with some of those children's cases in our behavioral supports program.
Jordan, so our next question comes from Kim Little. Kim wants to know if an individual doesn't have DDS residential funding but has community first choice funding, would they still be considered for supportive housing?
That's a really good question. And I would like to say yes, but I'm going to have to research that a little bit. The community first choice, for people who don't, we call it CFC. Community first choice is a state plan amendment for specific types of hands-on support that individuals need. And not everyone is eligible for that. Or there are some places where that's not really the type of the support the individual and family are looking for. But the nice part about these affordable housing is there was no annualized funding, but the types of CFC, community first choice supports they got was enough. That may be a case where we would want to try and include that person, and depending on the cost of those. So that's a great question that you posited, and I'd like to look at that. And this Kim will Gunnar has your name. We'll try and figure that out with you, and it may be a good example of things that we can do to improve opportunities and access. So I can't give you a definite yes, but I can give you a definite we want to talk more.
Our next question comes from Noreen Simmons. Noreen wants to know, with the supportive housing, the complex, is the supportive housing complex secure as far as monitoring who comes in and out of the building?
Elisa, you've been to more than I have.
I have. Each complex is going to have a different setup, but I do know that if the link that I shared in the chat, you're going to see Lauren and Scott give a tour of their apartment. What they have is a fob on their keychain that tenants in the building have, that they have to, like when you go into a hotel, that you have to scan the fob in order for the door to unlock. That's in order to enter the building. And then there is additional security within the building. Each apartment complex is a little different. They may have different setups, but they're generally for all tenants, not just the set-aside apartments. There are generally safeguards that are built in, and there are housing standards, lighting, so outside security that are in place to make sure that the setting is a safe setting.
So I wanted to add to that. So one of the things that makes them safe is even if there's not 24/7 support in the apartment, there's 24/7 support available, and people who live there and people who live around there know that it is a supported, you can see a staff presence. So that's part of that. And another question that I saw in the chat a moment ago is around what's the incentive for landlords to want to do affordable housing? Let me tell you, having done this for a long time, there is no better tenant in the entire world than someone who is supported by a DD agency. We pay our rent on time. We keep people whole. When someone moves out, there's someone that's to step in to cover the rent. We are really, really good tenants. And in addition to the fact that we pay our rent on time, that gives them, the landlord, a sense of on-site security, because there's an extra set of eyes and ears beyond the tenants who are renting there, who are vested in it being a good living place. If I would, if I was out there renting houses, I would be catering to agencies wanting, because the guaranteed on, you know, it's the rent is, it's just automatic, and it's full, and so I think there's lots of reasons developers would. With the affordable, with the developments, there are tax incentives that have made developers want to partner. They get help in building these developments and then get income for years to follow. And are left with a building that's an asset for them. So there's a number of reasons why this makes a lot of sense. It's a win-win-win kind of opportunity for the people who live there, for the agency supporting the individual, for families, and for the developer.
Commissioner, I do want to get to one question before we get to Lena. I see she has her hand up, but Mary DeSimone wants to know, what if you can't get staff for your child? It's been a few years and I cannot get anybody. During COVID, Appendix K really helped. Is there a way for a parent to be paid as a caregiver?
There is an interesting conversation going on legislatively around that very issue. We don't understand what the full fiscal impact is for what that would mean and what it might obligate us. We are closely monitoring some federal stuff going on, both at the Center for Medicaid Services, Medicare Services. You'll hear me in conversations that refer to CMS, Center for Medicare Services, as well as some lobbying legislatively at both the federal and state level. And a number of states have submitted requests to CMS, Center for Medicare Services, to carry over that exception in the Appendix K. There are mechanisms already in place for us to approve certain situations for people to be paid, families to be paid. The current rules around it mean you can't be the employer of record or the legal guardian for the individual and get paid. But there's a number of family members who can get paid who are not the employee of record or the guardian. That's a tough situation. And in one of our other family calls, we had a very hearty conversation about guardianship and the Connecticut's historical position on that, and some discussions about what might look different and what other states are doing. And that we can do that as a whole other conversation, but around supported decision making, because in those situations when the person's their own guardian, it opens up additional opportunities for that type of family paid support. But we don't have those rules on the books yet. They're just concepts we're monitoring in other states. If we see those other states become successful and we study what their guide rails are, I think that so candidly, I think what I know from what I do, governments are going to have to look to change their position on that because of the lack of booming in population at the ages necessary to support the rest of us when we need care as we continue to age, that there are not going to be enough people to do that. So I think when push comes to shove, there will be continued movement on that. We're watching closely. Krista Ostaszewski, who I don't think is on the call tonight, is our Medicaid waiver operations director for DDS, and has been in close contact at the federal level, and provided testimony. I was unavailable earlier this week and provided testimony before Human Services Committee on the raised bill. So there's more to come on that, but there's no immediate relief for you now. The original question about finding staff, Elisa talked a little bit about the expanding rewarding work and some of the ways we try and connect, but I don't want to blow smoke. This is as tough as it's been ever in my career at finding staff. Shannon Giacovino, as our ombudsperson, submits a report to the DS Council every month, and that has been on one of her top concerns every month since she started, which is now longer than I can believe, but a little while ago. It has been at the forefront, both at the provider level and the self-hire level, that workforce stuff.
Len, I see you have your hand up if you'd like to unmute and ask your question.
Yes, Commissioner, I believe I asked this question before, but I want to ask it again. It's about the service dogs. Because remember that we have the like maybe 10 or 12 different kinds of service dog, the emotional dog, the stress dog, the PTSD dog, dogs for blind and deaf, dogs for no hearing, PTSD veterans. Then I want to know if right now that we are going to have these wonderful residential, places, if the dogs they're going to be included, or it's going to be in the program too.
So by law, under ADA, there are certain rules by which a dog can be certified in a certain program and the therapy to be trained. There are only certain conditions under law that mandate under ADA, service dogs for the blind. There can't be any discrimination to a tenant for having a service dog for the blind. I don't know the other categories off the top of my head, and I promised you I'd research it, and I haven't done that yet. So we will follow up on that, Lena. But it's a great question. So thank you for asking it, and we owe you a better answer than I've given tonight. And I think Gunnar and Kevin, I think Commissioner Porter probably has a really good handle on that. And we can reach out to her to see if they have some answers.
All right. Commissioner, next, before we get to Lynn Arizini, I see Lynn has her hand up. I wanted to get to a question in the chat from Peg Shugru. She's wondering what is happening with the DDS waitlist for those who need housing? How will individuals on those lists obtain access to new housing opportunities?
That's a great question, and it's a lot. We've covered, and I think so. We've covered some of that tonight. This part of the conversation is to try and create, to use what we have already and innovate and transform some of what already exists to create additional opportunities for people on the wait list. The governor's budget didn't indicate money as part of a wait list, but as I will tell you that money isn't really our obstacle right now. It's staff. The workforce development. So even with a bucket full of gold dumped at my feet, I don't know that we're going to find the bodies to provide all the support we need in the immediate future. But we are working long term to do just that. And these conversations, when I saw the amount of money that we would be coming into as a result of this, and as the commissioner, there were a lot of places we could have impacted change that would have been meaningful. But so much of what's been done has not been addressed towards the wait list that I thought there was a way that we could have these conversations and create opportunities for both people on the inside and the outside looking in. Depending on the type of support you want, there is a wait list, but there are a couple areas in which we are not waiting if we can find the right opportunity for you. So some of that has been through the supportive housing. People who had very little funding and only needed access to 24/7, didn't need constant 24/7, who had in-home supports have moved from home to a setting like this but they don't have a lot of funding attached and didn't need additional funding. The other type of supports that we are quick to provide are our community companion homes. Those are homes, some states refer to them as host homes. There's other names for them, but essentially we identify someone who's looking to share their home with someone with intellectual disability. They receive a stipend and as additional support. One of the things we're looking at in this transformation is there an opportunity to bulk up the supports to those CCH providers, community companion home providers, and provide perhaps physical plant modifications like ramping or handrails or things that would make, we don't expect providers' homes to be fully accessible, but are there things we can do to make the home more accessible? So that conversation starts with, we are working through some of the people on the wait list, depending on the age of caregiver, to see if there's an opportunity now with some of the vacancies that exist across the state in our existing group homes.
Lynn, I see you have your hand up. You can go ahead, unmute and ask your question.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Commissioner.
Hi, Lynn.
I just wanted to say something about the service dog, because I'm looking into that for my son, Carl. And there is a place in Torrington, Connecticut that trains these dogs. And from what I understand, after a lengthy conversation with one of the people that's a provider there that trains the dogs, that the ADA it says that anyone who has a licensed service dog, whether it's for blind or for deaf or for autism, for emotional support, they are allowed to have those dogs anywhere. So that came from her, from the Torrington facility. So I'm going to fill out the application and look into it more for my son. So I just thought I'd add that because I just found that out. But my question was, is there any chance that somebody, a landlord who owns a house that has multiple families, could something like a multiple family house be considered for cluster housing? That was my first question. And then my second question is, my son has DSS home health aides besides the DDS supports for community supports. If he went into a cluster home like the one that hopefully is starting in Westville, would he be able to keep all those supports as well?
The answer to the second question, Lynn, is probably. So what Medicaid doesn't allow is for you to bill for the same service at the same time for the same person. And the reason that those DSS support hours would never work in a group home is because a group home is a comprehensive 24-hour a day, 7-day a week benefit to the individual. So you can't layer, you can't stack Medicaid services. But if Carl was living in an apartment in a place where there was this cluster of supports and he only needed intermittent supports, that the DSS community first choice or home health aid hours could be part of that, and any DDS hours, they just couldn't duplicate the same service. So typically the DSS services are very hands-on. That's what they'll pay for through those supports. And when I say hands-on, it may be administration of medication, supporting someone who needs help with eating. So I don't mean just physical management or nursing services, but it has to be, you know, pretty direct services. But it's not focused on the community integration, the socialization, and the adult daily living learning skills. That's how the two can supplement each other, but it'll come down to a very case specific situation. So did I answer both questions, Lynn?
You answered that one. Yeah, right now, just so you know, we definitely have them separate times. And the home health aid is more for ADLs and helping with cleaning and cooking. And then the DDS supports are taking them shopping and, you know, all that stuff. So that's what I would like to see in place still, in that if he switched to. And then my other question, the first question was, if a landlord had a multiple family dwelling, not an apartment building, would that smaller thing ever be considered for cluster house? Because that's kind of what he has now, is a multiple family house.
So I want to make sure there's, and I know that our words are becoming muddy as I'm looking at the chat. And so I want to be really clear. Supportive housing is about affordable housing that groups some people to create efficiencies for supports. We separately from that also have clustered rates for in-home supports. And in fact, you know, I know because I created one with JCL in West Hartford. We have a 3-story tenement building, and that's a bad word for it, but you know, there are 3 separate units in a Victorian home in West Hartford. You can visualize that. And the individuals supported in that get different levels of support, and one of them gets 24/7 in their unit, and the other people get intermittent supports, and we can make that happen. What's hard is making sure that everybody has enough hours to add together, and it isn't communal, but there needs to be enough to piece together that 24/7 piece if no one in the house is getting 24/7 supports already.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, those are possibilities. Well, and you know, related to another question in the chat, families, there are ways to create opportunities for people to have homes. The issue is also making sure that the funding is there and that it will work. So, you know, we often have families who say, you know, I'll give my house to my loved one, you just provide the supports and that'll be great. And we can't always do that, although we can. There's a number of reasons that doesn't work, and sometimes it does work. And right now we're in an opportunity where we have some latitude, we have some flexibility we don't normally get from the federal government. So even if you've been told no previously, now is a good time to ask again, and to elevate that again. And our regional staff are aware that we're looking for innovation and opportunity, and we have a broader opportunity to explore some things during this couple year spend window. So you may want to bring that back to us again if you've explored it and we haven't been able to respond. Maybe we can figure out a way to fit the round peg in the square hole.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Joetta? You need to unmute, Joetta.
Commissioner, I had an experience that I wanted to share with you regarding my 20-year-old daughter. She was in a transition program, and the transition program at her high school basically informed me that their only responsibility in terms of mobility was to teach her how to ride the bus. We as parents thought there might be an opportunity for her to drive a car. And the school said that's not our responsibility. So I searched high and low throughout the state, because you could imagine to put an ID child behind the wheel of a car before doing any other practice would be dangerous. And I searched the state and finally found the Sacred Heart University has a simulator that is literally a car in a room with wall-to-wall screens. And they were gracious enough to allow her to use the simulator for 8 weeks. And she progressed very well and was then able to take her permit test and is now doing driver's ed. And she would have never gotten there. And I just say as a parent, you know, we realize how small this child's world would have been if she had to live on the bus line. So would you consider looking into this? Because Easter seals and all that, they will do testing for people who have strokes to see if they could drive a car, but not provide simulator training in preparation.
So Joetta, can you repeat again where you did find that?
Well, they're going to be inundated, I'm afraid,
Okay.
but
So
Sacred
that,
Heart.
can you email me
Okay.
or
okay.
Gunnar and and we'll follow up from there. So there are some driving programs that exist in the DMV directly can create some opportunities. Varian Salters was on the call earlier. Varian, are you still out there? I don't hear him. Varian is one of our self-advocate coordinators who works for me, and I've known him before he worked for me, so I'll tell you he's also my friend, and a really good guy. He drives, and he drives everywhere. He's not
the only one.
Oh, are you there?
No, that's me, Senator. No, I'm sorry, real quick though. I'm also the president of the self-advocacy group of the Arc of Eastern Connecticut, and I've been driving for the last 20 years though. And when I was in high school, I had to go get my learner's permit to learn how to drive and everything else. And then when I learned how to drive, I drove myself to school, I drove myself to work. And then all these years now, I've been driving since. So that's why you can get around from place to place though. And I know there's a lot of people, I know there's a lot of parents will try to help their kids and say to them, like they can drive though, but then they will have, I know sometimes the testing is a little bit different though than it was before back in my time.
Mm-hmm.
So, but like
Thank
I said,
you,
that was a good question. What Miss Kim was saying was asking that question though and everything else. So, and that's why I was gonna put that little input in there and everything else. So that's why I was mostly coming up. I want to come up and say that to you. And I think that's really good for some of us who can drive and everything else. So, because Varian Salters, he was also my ex-roommate though, and he also drive too and everything else. So I've known him for many years though.
I bet you've known him longer than I have, Aaron. Thanks for speaking up and speaking out. I appreciate you being on the call tonight.
I appreciate it though. I mean, this is very important though for all of us and all the staff and everything else. So, and we appreciate you being on this call. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And one of our case management supervisor from the West, one of our case management supervisors from the West, dropped something in the chat about using it's now Aging and Disability Services. It was Bureau of Rehab Services. Alex, did you have anything more just to offer than that? What you put in the chat? I think just what he has in the chat there, and I can't get my computer to do what I want it to do. But Alex Montalvo put something in there about using ADS, and my partner in crime at Commissioner Porter, that'll be on our list of follow-up with her as well. But and Joetta, thanks for raising that. You know, I tell this often. I've been in the business a long time, and individuals like Aaron and others have only ever asked me for three things. They want a place to live, they want a place to work, and a way to get back and forth. And when they tell me that, it seems so simple. That way to get back and forth is so often the biggest of all the challenges. Is transportation. And in a small state like Connecticut, you can get some really good public transportation if you live in the right place. But if you live in one of the four corners, you can't get to the center or the southern part of the state without a lot of time on a bus. And needing to sometimes manage multiple transfers and understand the difference between the express and the local and all the stuff that goes with that. Although we do provide travel training. Elisa, your hand's up. You have something to add, please.
Thank you.
This is such a good conversation. I just wanted to, when you talked about the simulator at Sacred Heart, it made me think about something that's happening a lot in the assistive technology world. That simulation, some of you may have virtual reality goggles, or that's being used a lot in our service system. So if there is something that maybe provokes anxiety, maybe going to the dentist provokes anxiety, or somebody's thinking about you know, a job, but there, you know, it's a lot to go into, you know, a work environment and interview. All of those things now are available in a simulated experience, so you can get comfortable. You know what it looks like. You know what to expect. It's made a world of difference as far as just being able to take part in things that maybe would have been too intimidating previously. So that is a great example. That simulator, a great example of what's available through technology these days.
Yeah, thank you.
Erin Keneally is one of our clinical staff. Erin, do you want to talk about the link you just dropped in there? And if you don't want to be on the spot, we'll just use the link.
Yeah, I was just on that link. UConn does something similar. It might be an avenue to explore as an option besides Sacred Heart.
Terrific. Yeah, that's terrific. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you knowing that and sharing it. Thanks for being on the call tonight too, Erin. I mentioned a lot of different disciplines. I didn't mention some of the clinical staff who've been very involved in these conversations. So thank you for joining, Erin.
And I thought we were our favorites. We fell off the list.
What do we got next, Gunnar?
So the next question, Commissioner, comes from Darlene Bohr. Darlene wants to know, as more people with autism enter adult DDS services, what are plans to provide training specific to autism, like ABA basics, SIBs, prevention strategies, and sensory needs, etc.?
Thanks, Darlene, for the question. I'm going to circle. So we have some agencies who have terrific capacity in that area, who are not only contracted providers for us, but are also contracted providers through DSS for autism services and through Beacon for autism services. But we do need additional training. We have some really good expertise within DDS, and to that trains on positive behavioral supports in particular, and trauma-informed care. And it is not always focused on a strict applied behavior analysis approach, but that is part of what they do. And I don't know if any of my on some of the other calls, we've had a couple of the psychologists in the regions. I don't know if any of them are on tonight, but we can add that. We need training and staff development and workforce development as part of the ARPA stuff that we're looking at doing. So Darlene, I'll circle around with Elisa where that is in conversation. And I know that you are heavily involved with the DD Council, or at least I think you are. Or were, and you're at Futures now, I think. But we can talk more about that, and would love to have a conversation about what it is DDS can do to support that outside of the certificate and credentialed programs offered at most of the state institutions now around applied behavior analytics.
Thank you. And I just love these conversations, and I love the direction DDS is going. So thank you for this.
Thank you, Darlene. And you know, for those of you who've been at the North Region RACs or others, you know, a number of the people on the call have been engaged with us in conversation for many years. I appreciate that support, Darlene. I know we haven't always necessarily been as responsive to some of the concerns you have raised, but you have been patient with us, and those conversations, I think, have become increasingly more fruitful as we continue to engage together. So for those of you who are visiting with me for the first time, if you didn't get the answer you wanted tonight, Darlene's a living example. Keep coming back. And we would love to have you, even when we can't always give you exactly what you want. It's good to see you, Darlene.
Our next question comes from Kurt and Betsy Danforth. They want to know, it's related to the wait list. Does DDS track the people in the wait list by level of need and track at that level? I thought I saw a breakdown in the DDS presentation, but it is not in the MRI report.
Yeah, so the MIR is the Management Information Report. A lot of times it's a very long report. It's a very long report, but it's got a lot of good information. But if you're new to DDS, it's probably a horrible place to start, unless you want to know just a specific number. And there's some people on the phone even more familiar with breezing through that than I am, but I use it all the time. We are in the middle of preparing a legislative. There was a request legislatively for some breakdown of that lawn information, level of need information, and once we have that fine-tuned, we can share it out. And it does a couple of things. It shows the type of service being requested and the level of need. It shows and it shows geographically some of the need by region or concentrated area. And we included in that a current distribution of vacant opportunities in group homes, as well as geographic locations of where those vacancies are. Most of you are probably aware that the biggest clusters of group homes exist nearest where institutions once were. So there was not a lot of opportunity when Mansfield closed. There are some homes in the greater Mansfield area. The greatest concentration of them is in the greater Manchester area, though, about 10 miles west. There are some in and around the Southbury, Southington area, and the Meriden area has a proliferation, most around the central portion of the state. But when we have approval on and I have those pulled together and signed off on them, we can share some of that information with this group, and look forward to being able to do so. It's really, really interesting. It really is interesting to look at because there's the types of support some people, and I know that some families leave these calls feeling like we cater largely to people, and I don't typically use the word higher functioning, lower lawn. You'll see that we have people at all lawn levels and all service types. That the rates that we publish are guideline, that some individuals need greater or lesser support than those guidelines, and we try and come up with solutions that work for everyone. Some of these more independent settings or less concentrated settings really work well for people who have high lawns, high level of need, but do really poorly in congregate settings because they get along great with staff, but they don't always get along great with housemates, if you will. And so sometimes smaller settings work well for people and individuals, and sometimes less staff is better. And I know that runs counterintuitive, but we've seen it particularly with our individuals who we support who not only have intellectual disability, but a chronic and persistent mental health issue. Sometimes staff exacerbates that. And so finding that right balance. But when I look at that data, that's one of the stories that I always jumps out at me is look at those people living in those relatively independent settings. We have some providers in that community companion home who are retired staff or who've done this type of work their whole life, and challenging behavior or challenging needs isn't an obstacle for them. It's actually really something they're good at and a gift they have and one they wish to share.
Commissioner, our next question comes from Peg Shugri. Peg wants to know, you mentioned earlier there is a shortage of available workforce to assist with supportive housing. Are these resources hired by DDS, DSS, or elsewhere?
So I started off the conversation talking about the evolution of the haves and the have-nots, and why I was really interested in trying to make this opportunity work for everyone. There was a time where the majority of supports were state funded, and then it struck a balance where it was about half private and half public. More than 95% of our supports now are supported through the private sector, or it's at least greater than 90. I think it's now greater than 95%. As an example, licensed group homes, there's close to 875 in the state. Only 30 of those are operated by public. The rest are all operated by the private sector. There's almost no day service available in public anymore, except for a few limited opportunities. All of that's in the private sector. I will tell you, and I don't know if we have any families from public on the call tonight. Even in our public programs, we're not attracting staff the way we used to. And we have real deficits in staffing at some of our locations. So it's a global phenomenon. My primary concern are the staff funded by DDS, although so part of the acronym SOUP. ICFs, intermediate care facilities, which include two of our regional centers, three of our regional centers, Lower Fairfield Center, Northwest Center, Hartford Regional Center, but also a number of group homes in the private sector. Those are funded through directly through DSS. And so it gets even, for those of you who are saying, how do you figure all this out? That's just another layer of complexity, and I typically don't get into that, but there are a much smaller number of group homes operated by private providers funded by DSS.
Commissioner, I don't see, I don't see any other questions in the chat, folks. If you have any other questions, feel free to raise your hand or place them in the chat.
So Stacy Varvaro wants to know how to find out about the next one. We've got you now, Stacy. Kevin and Gunnar aren't going to let you miss the next one. So we'll make sure that everyone who's on the call tonight continues to get invited. We anticipate this is a process, and will continue throughout our ARPA initiative. But given the number of registrants and the people who wish to participate, and that I can get this big a group together and people find it helpful, my friends the Lamonicos have visited with me a few times through the years at smaller group sessions that we've scattered around the state. I think I last saw you, Norma, down in Norwich. I think was the last one you were at live and in person pre-COVID, maybe. But these, I can reach a bigger audience this way. And while I'd rather be in person, I think we'll get back to in-person stuff too, because I think that's powerful and meaningful. But I think that this works. We'll continue these, and as much as you can participate, as I said earlier, we solve something for one person, we create opportunity for all people. So that's sort of my mantra there. And it's good to see you. You have a question, Norma?
Yeah, just that we met in Willimantic at a Special Olympics event.
Oh, I mentioned that to staff earlier. I just saw you down there, and I finally got to meet your son. I've been talking to you and your husband for years, but never met Matt.
Yeah. I met him then.
My wife was running a Special Olympics. Was it Thanksgiving or?
Yeah, it was Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Over at Tech. See you there.
Willimantic Tech.
Yep.
Wyndham Tech. Yep.
Yep.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you as well.
Good to see you again.
I'm also with Special Olympics Global Messenger myself, though. So I've been with Special Olympics for a long time. So
Did you-
that's why I reach out to a lot of people on the other Zooms. And when I talk to them about what things need to be said and heard, we need to make sure like we know that we're trying to spread the word for a lot of people. And I also volunteer. I am also with parents with kids with disabilities too, and we're trying to work on that too and everything else. So, and we're trying to spread the word with that and everything else. So, but we appreciate for you coming though. Thank you.
There was one other question in the chat around an individual who needs one-to-one support and supportive housing. You know, I don't think there should be rules around that. We'd figure it out on a case-by-case basis. If they have the funding and that's a better setting, like I said, sometimes less is more. It would depend on what their needs are, and we would certainly want to talk more about that. I can't make any promises, but we would hope to see some of that. So before I think some people are beginning to drop off, and I don't see anything else additional in the chat. Let me just you know, cap the evening with this. You know, I hope I don't ever have another opportunity like COVID that presents an opportunity like this big chunk of money I have. I didn't want to be the commissioner of a pandemic, but we did a pretty good job at it. And now we have this little bit of light that shines through the gray that was a really long period of time. So we have this opportunity to come together and maybe try and fix some of the things that have not worked well at DDS. When I say that, I don't mean my staff. I don't mean the intent. I mean that I've heard from a number of people, some on the call tonight, some at other times, where we just don't meet people where they are, and we are not flexible enough, and we've limited creativity, not because of lack of ingenuity on behalf of my staff, not because of the spirit of my case managers who work very hard to help make outcomes happen, but sometimes we just can't get out of our way, or there's rules. This is an opportunity, and we really want to leverage that. And so the way we'll do that, though, is not me coming up with ideas, or me and Elisa and my leadership staff sitting in a closed room coming up with ideas and saying, here's what's best for your kids. We need to hear, or your loved ones, or you as individuals, Aaron and some of the other people who joined us tonight. We need to hear from you, and I need you to be part of the conversation. There's a meta effect when we have this kind of groupthink and this discussion. So keep coming back. Let's keep the conversation going, and let's really take advantage of this opportunity. I've said it previously at the other meetings, and I'll stop using it after this first round is done, but someone else said it a long time ago, and I've been using it. If not us, then who? And if not now, then when? Let's seize this opportunity and make the most of it, and see if we can meet the needs of as many people as possible each and every day. I thank you for your time tonight. I'm going to go have dinner. Email us with any questions you may have, or things you didn't feel comfortable saying out loud tonight, or you didn't feel comfortable coming on camera. We'll respond to it all. And thank you again to all of our friends and partners on the call who supported me, and look forward to seeing you at the next one. Take care.